everybody, and welcome to today's edition of Liberty Action Network TV. I'm your host, Doreen Finkel, and today, folks, we are going to be talking about immigration reform. It is the second of a two-part interview with former INS Special Agent Michael Cutler. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much for having me, Doreen.
I want to start by the fact that there was a Gallup poll done in way back in 2012 that said that only 3% of Americans think that immigration is an important issue. And I want to ask your opinion on that and say where we're coming from.
Because people don't really understand what immigration is really about. And you even find this with politicians. They think it's either a minor issue or it's about votes. What they don't really understand is that immigration really isn't a single issue, but as I always like to point out, it's a singular issue because it impacts so many other challenges and threats, not only confronting the United States, but confronting American citizens in their own country.
So would you say that the media has something to do with this? Maybe the Americans don't know how important the issue is, or?
I would say that, well, let me ask you a question. How many times have you been a witness, live and in person, to a newsworthy event?
Where immigration was talked about?
Any kind of event. No.
Okay.
When was the last time you were standing there and something happened that wound up on the evening news?
Not that much.
Right. And for the folks out there, I'm going to bet that you've never been a witness or rarely been a witness to something that's newsworthy. So how do we know what's going on? We're reliant on the journalists, so-called. And that's why the Founding Fathers understood that journalism was so important, because the electorate needs to be informed. But if your only source of information is other people who are telling you what's going on, then how do you really know what the story is? And how do you know what place and what prominence to give those stories that are out there? You know, you watch these news programs, and they'll run a show about a woman who found a way to bake cake without flour, followed by some overthrow of a government in Asia, followed by a story about a car crash. And all of those stories jumbled together, 3-minute segments. It becomes very difficult to prioritize and say, yeah, that's the lead story. This is the important story. You know, when I was a kid, if they said breaking news, you sat down and you grabbed the armrests of your seat because a plane crashed, a leader of a country was assassinated, an astronaut was launched into space. How often do you watch network news today, especially with this 24-hour news cycle, where everything is breaking news?
But shouldn't something like a story like this be newsworthy? Johnny comes in from Mexico or wherever. He comes in illegally, and he murders somebody. Shouldn't that be news too?
Well,
Should that make the front page?
It should. And so now here's the problem. We have an administration today, and we've had prior administrations. This isn't the first administration to get immigration wrong. You don't wind up, and I don't believe this 11 million figure. I think we probably have more like 30, 35 million. God only knows how many illegal aliens here. This didn't happen yesterday. You can't get 35 million people to enter the United States in 3 weeks. This has been ongoing since the amnesty of 1986. Back then, supposedly, we reset the clock to almost zero. So how did we go from almost zero a quarter of a century ago to where we have the largest population of illegal aliens in the history of the country? And now ask yourself, are the people reporting on the news ignorant of the facts? Is there an agenda in play? Are they not putting it in proper perspective? Let me give you folks out there something to think about. And I made this point when I did a speaking event, a seminar for a bunch of Air Force brass. These were mostly colonels and generals in the U.S. Air Force. And I always tell people, if you're to get in front of an audience, never be accused of being an unlicensed anesthesiologist. Keep it interesting. So it was after lunch. These guys looked a little bit drowsy, and these gals, and I said, I'd like to know why in the world we still have a military. And I suddenly had 80 people doing their best Jack Nicholson at the court-martial impersonation. It was remarkable. And I said, here's the point, before you reach for your sidearms. Your primary mission in the military, and I don't care if you're in the Air Force, the Marines, the Army, the Navy, the Coast Guard, everyone's got the same primary mission. Keep America's enemies as far from us as possible, as far from our shores, as far from our borders. How does the military accomplish their primary objective when we already have unknown millions of foreign nationals in our country who entered the country by sneaking in, by evading that inspections process that's supposed to keep out aliens with dangerous communicable diseases, aliens who are fugitives from justice in other countries, aliens with serious criminal histories, rape, murder, arson, whatever. Aliens who are spies, terrorists, human rights violators, war criminals, and finally aliens who would become a public charge, or aliens who would take the job an America desperately needs. Well, if that screening process is being avoided or evaded by someone, you have to make a presumption. That person snuck in because they know they can't pass muster. They can't be screened and be allowed in. So don't you think among them are some truly bad people?
Yes, and I also think that that should make the news, but it doesn't.
It doesn't, and it's never portrayed that way. And let me give you an example. And I know that your focus, as it should be, is on kids, college students. Isn't it remarkable that we keep on seeing those sympathetic pictures of children around the world who are starving? And I feel terrible, don't misunderstand me. But do you know that right now 1 in 4 American kids is living below the poverty line?
No, and the news doesn't bring that to your attention.
No, now can you explain to me why we now have what I've come to call reverse xenophobia? Why is it that an American child, and we're not just talking about white kids now, we're talking about black, Latino, Asian ancestry, Americans are as diverse a population as any you'll find on the planet. In fact, you could show children's faces on the wall, a projection, and nobody would be able to determine if we were looking at American kids or not, because America is that diverse. So then why is it with all this story about poverty that it's very rare? Although I will tell you that Dan Rather did a story about 2 years ago, I wrote about it, or 3 years ago. It was called No Thanks for Everything. And the story was about how computer programmers, American workers, are being displaced by people from India. See, it's not just the people at the bottom rung, it's also the middle class, it's the high-tech workers, and it's being done to destroy the middle class, and I can prove it. But you ask your question, and then I'll give you my proof of how this is an engineered destruction of America's middle class.
Just tell us what you mean by xenophobia, that word.
Xenophobia.
I know phobia is fear, but fear.
Fear of outsiders, fear of people from elsewhere. And in fact, anthropologists will tell you that no matter what culture we look at, they always have the concept of we the people, they the outsiders. So xenophobia is a fear of the outsider.
Oh, okay.
So here it's a reverse, where suddenly we are being led to believe that Americans are worthless. Think of the politicians, and think how amazing it is that they get reelected. Americans won't do those jobs. Right, we're too lazy or we're too stupid. We must be stupid because we vote for these same nitwits year in and year out. The power of the incumbency is amazing. But this is really a desire to drive down the wages so that the people at the top of the food chain can make still more money, greater profit. The people that are that wealthy and that selfish and that focused on wealth remind me of a malignant tumor. Cancer has an insatiable appetite for nutrients, so much so that it actually secretes hormones that enable it to grow blood vessels around it, so it bathes itself in nutrients. You have people that are the top fraction of a percent, not 1%, but a fraction of a percent, who are so addicted to wealth that they are willing to destroy America so they can become wealthier. And I'm not talking about millionaires, but billionaires. Let me read something to you. I think this is really important because most people don't get this. Alan Greenspan testified before Chuck Schumer's immigration subcommittee, April 30th, 2009. Go to my website, michaelcutler.net. Go to capsweb.org. And he was talking, and he spoke about Bill Gates saying that we need more H-1B visas. Now, H-1B visa is a visa given to a foreign worker who is a skilled professional. Could be a computer programmer, could be an engineer, could be a scientist, a biochemist doing cancer research, high-tech field, people with degrees, often advanced degrees. And so he goes and testifies about why we need to bring in lots more high-tech workers. Now, you should know, and I don't buy the unemployment statistics that we're hearing, by the way. What is it, 6.6%? Are you kidding? You have record numbers of Americans
yeah, but
that
that
work.
doesn't include all of those who have gone through the benefits and exhausted them, and those who are only working part-time. So the
Or
unemployment
given
rate.
up looking, and right. So you know what that's
Yes.
like? You know what this is like, Doreen? The kid that's telling the parents, be proud, I did great on my science test. I know I've been flunking all year, but I got an 80. And the parents look at the exam, and he got an 80 on the first question and left out all the other questions. That's what they're doing here. They're leaving out 20-odd or 30-odd million Americans who have lost their jobs and basically have lost their hope along with their thin grasp on the middle class.
Yes, and I want to talk a little bit about the politicians, because I have brought this up to some elected officials.
As have I.
Yes. And I seem to get an answer, oh, well, it's not that important, or we don't want to be bothered with it, or maybe they do, but there's something that I'm missing here.
Yeah, well, this is what they're missing. Alan Greenspan, folks, laid it out, believe it or not. I'm quoting from Greenspan. And by the way, you can go online. The Senate Judiciary Committee website has this video. Although once they see this video, they'll probably take it down. But I want you to know that he really said this. And I was on a radio show the day afterwards. This young lady said, what'd you think of Greenspan? I said, well, it was the first time I'd seen someone testify who was suffering from rigor mortis. I mean, I can't stand this guy, because anybody who could say this about hardworking Americans is despicable. Here it is. This isn't explaining why we need more high-tech workers. And by the way, 6.6% for all American unemployed. You know what the unemployment rate is for America's high-tech workers?
What?
Over 14%.
Oh, my goodness.
So we have a shortage? Really?
Wow. Yeah, that I didn't know.
Well, most people don't, and it's not being covered. So how does anybody know? So here is what Alan Greenspan said. And this is taken from his prepared testimony. This wasn't said by accident. This testimony was provided in advance to the subcommittee before the hearing.
Go ahead, you can read it.
First, skilled workers and their families form new households. They will of necessity move into vacant housing units. Isn't that a poetic way to describe an American home lost to foreclosure? A vacated housing unit. Warms my heart, okay? The current glut of which is depressing prices of American homes, and of course, house price declines are a major factor in mortgage foreclosures and in the plunge of and the value of the vast quantity of U.S. mortgage-backed securities that has contributed substantially to the disabling of our banking system. Well, in other words, if we can get more foreign workers with their families to move into the houses, we can jack up the price of real estate so the banks can make more money, and we will put those houses further out of the reach of American workers and families. Thank you, Alan Greenspan. Now, I'm not done. This is the appetizer. Here's the main course. The second bonus would address the increasing concentration of income in this country. In other words, someone's making too much damn money. I wonder who that could be. Greatly expanding our quotas for the highly skilled would lower wage premiums of the skilled over the lesser skilled. Follow the bouncing ball. Skill shortages in America exist because we are shielding our skilled labor force from world competition. Quotas have been substituted for the wage pricing mechanism, and in the process, we have created, and you're going to love this term, a privileged elite whose incomes are being supported at non-competitively high levels by immigration quotas on skilled professionals, the middle class.
So
eliminating
that's what
such
it does.
restrictions would reduce at least some of our income inequality. In other words, the middle class is making too much money. If we could cut the legs off the middle class, we could lower their wages. And you know what? There won't be that much of a wage disparity between the poor and the middle class. When you hear people talking about income equality, this, Doreen, is what they're talking about. Yes, they'll raise the minimum wage a little bit, and I'm all in favor of raising a minimum wage. You need to pay people enough money to justify setting an alarm clock in the morning when you consider what it costs to go to a job. But to turn around and talk about a wage premium being paid to middle-class workers? Not the wage premium paid to the CEOs who make $100 million and fly around the world in a private plane that's a 757. But the wage premium, and he said we've got to stop shielding American workers. Do you know that the immigration laws right now do shield American workers from foreign competition? So what do they want for reform? Remove the shield. Shields down, as Captain Kirk might say. You know, shields up, they want the shields down. And what is those laws shielding us from? Criminals, terrorists, and foreign workers. So we'll accept the terrorists if it means at the end of the day we can drive down the wages, or the wage premium, as Greenspan explains it.
And
What do you think of that?
You had just mentioned something very important on what it does to the middle class. And so therefore it's people like me who need to wake up other people in the middle class to this issue to see how it affects them.
And people need to understand that. Now, here's another deal, okay? Every year, over $200 billion gets wired out of the United States by foreign workers, legal and illegal. $200 billion. When you take the multiplier effect into account, and what's the multiplier effect? I'm glad you asked. It's the money that gets circulated through the economy and generates more business. That was the idea behind the economic stimulus package. You go out, you're a carpenter, you build a house, you get paid. You go out, you buy a refrigerator. The guy that sells you the refrigerator buys a pair of shoes. The shoe salesman buys some more lumber so he can build his back deck. The money circulates. When the money is wired out, it's gone. No multiplier effect. The multiplier effect, if you take that into account, basically the 200 billion becomes over 500 billion, $500 billion. This is getting to be serious money. So we are increasing America's deficit every year by more than $500 billion just by virtue of the remittances being wired out of the United States by foreign workers. Now let's add to that another number. The American worker, like the folks that were filmed by Dan Rather and his hour-long special, No Thanks for Everything, those computer programmers, they went from solid middle-class jobs, owning houses, paying taxes, being good consumers, circulating that money. They lost their jobs, they lost their homes. Think of those vacated housing units. They lost their homes, and they went from earning money and paying taxes and being consumers to no longer paying taxes but drawing money out of the various programs, welfare, food stamps, housing subsidies, and they no longer have disposable income with which to make purchases. So I'm willing to bet that we're losing another couple of $100 billion. You've almost accounted for America's annual deficit just by looking at immigration. That's how important immigration is.
I have a mission, it's almost like a personal mission, and one is to wake up the young to this, the youth, and the other one, yes, I want to get them to see exactly what you just said, how it will affect them, and you just touched on a key point, because a lot of them are middle class.
And people go to college to get a better job, and they wind up with a student loan that looks more like a mortgage payment.
It does. It pretty much is a mortgage payment.
So now tell me something. What do we do now? You have a degree and you can't get a job and you're paying off a loan. Or you could be some guy that drives a sanitation truck, and there's nothing wrong. It's an honorable profession. My dad was a construction worker. I'm tired of blue-collar workers being beat up. The blue-collar workers do tough, back-breaking, dangerous work and built this country, and they continue to build this country. But the point is, why would we want to be a professional if the money isn't there and you wind up with a student loan and have to put off working for how many years so you can get that degree so that you can join the unemployed of America? Counterproductive, isn't it? And by the way, we're told by the politicians, and I want you folks out there to think about this, it's easy to ignore the poor. They're not glamorous. They live in neighborhoods you don't want to go visit, right? It's crime, it's filth. It's a terrible place. I've been there as an agent. I spent half my career with the Drug Task Force. If you're a child living in poverty, you don't have any good role models or few good role models, and you're living in a building where there are rodents running through the hallways, where the insects are so numerous when you turn on the light switch, you're treated to what we used to call the moving wall. It looks like the football stands with the fans doing the wave. What would you be willing to do to get out of that rat-infested building if you can't get a job? Would you be willing to commit a crime? I bet you would.
Yes, that's probably how they're thinking.
And because what are your hopes? You're going to get a job working at some hamburger joint and make minimum wage? Are you really going to get out of poverty on $10 or $12 or $14 an hour? No. So if you stymie Americans' efforts to get the education and get a salary commensurate with your efforts, talents, and hard work, what's left? We are destroying the middle class, and the middle class is synonymous with the American dream. So we have an administration that creates dreamers, illegal aliens, and by the way, you dare not use the word alien with these folks, but the A in dreamers for the DREAM Act is alien minor. Suddenly the word alien is acceptable because we can link that word, very poetically, folks, it's artistic license, with American dream. But why doesn't the American dream apply to Americans? And you know, something interesting happened the past couple of weeks. And I've made this point many times. I made it when I was down in South Carolina with my friends at the Tea Party. The debate rages, is the border secure, not secure, secure, not secure. And I was with Neil Cavuto not long ago, and he said, well, Mike, the arrests are down, so the borders are more secure. I said, that's nonsense. We have 50 border states. The only way of getting in is not the Mexican border. Any state with a seaport or an international airport or lies along the northern or southern borders are border states. And I said, trying to figure out who's here by looking at arrest records is like taking attendance by asking people who are not present to raise their hand. Does that work? No. You know the real metric for border security? The price of narcotics. And nobody was talking about the drugs until now an actor died of an overdose. And what are we finding out about the price of heroin? It's dirt cheap. And every gram of heroin that gets ingested by an addict is a substance that was smuggled across our borders. And the rate of heroin use has more than doubled, according to some studies that I've read, since President Obama took office. Well, if twice as many people are using this poison and the borders were secure, the price should go up. If the price doesn't go up, what does it tell you about the access that people have to this stuff? Clearly, the border is not secure. It's not even a speed bump. So look at what's happening. Most of the crime is directly or indirectly related to the drug trade. People that are hooked on drugs commit crime. We have a choice, ladies and gentlemen. We can build colleges and subsidize college education for American kids who show the ability and the desire and the industriousness to succeed, or we can build more prisons. What do you think is a better investment?
Right. So what do they say?
Well, I'm asking you. Right. What is better? Build more jails and imprison more of our population, mostly, by the way, members of the minority communities, or provide opportunities. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. We need to be teaching our kids how to fish, and we're not doing it, and it's willful. It's willful. Any politician who could stand there and say we need to staple a green card onto the diploma of a foreign student should not be re-elected, because what he or she is saying is, the hell with the American kids, let's bring in foreign students and educate them. And some of them, by the way, use their skills to attack us. We have policies of nuclear non-proliferation, but we're teaching physics to people from countries that may not like us.
That's right. And I also want to talk about the student visas.
Okay.
If my memory is correct, the Boston bombers, they came in our country via student visa.
Student visas, now here's the interesting thing, they then applied for political asylum. And this goes with what the administration is doing now. Their family did. So realize that in order to apply successfully for political asylum, you have to convince immigration that we live in a country where, because of our race, religion, ethnicity, tribal affiliation, political views, we face persecution or worse, murder, torture, whatever. We give you political asylum. I'm a big supporter of that plan. My grandmother died in the Holocaust. In fact, I had this discussion with Megyn Kelly last week over at Fox. I was on Fox and Friends this past weekend on this issue, and I'm very clear about it. When I was back in college, I demonstrated outside the White House with thousands of other folks from the B'nai B'rith and other groups. Dr. Ralph Abernathy, who worked closely with Dr. Martin Luther King, read a telegram of support, a statement of support. And Johnson, President Johnson, also sent us a telegram. For those of you not familiar with it, Google it. They don't have them anymore. But the president sent us a telegram from across the street from the Oval Office supporting us and saying, I appreciate your activism. And he got the Russians to let a certain number of religious minorities, including Jews, leave. And I will tell you, as an inspector, it warmed my heart to admit political refugees into the United States, to see the tears in their eyes. They'd hug me, they'd kiss me. It was wonderful. But the 9/11 Commission warned that because of a lack of integrity in that process, we're now giving political asylum to terrorists. Think about that. This guy, Amir Amil-Kansi, who shot up the CIA in 1993, January, applied for political asylum, citizen of Pakistan. How did he repay us? Killed 2 CIA officers and wounded 3 others. A month later, first attack World Trade Center, Ramzi Youssef was given political asylum, planted a bomb in the garage that killed 6 and wounded over 1,000. Almost brought the towers down. You've got the Tsarnaev brothers, Boston Marathon bombing. There's another guy by the name of Samuel Fezahazian from Eritrea, and they bragged about it on the DOJ website. Why are they bragging? He pleaded guilty to alien smuggling. It turned out that we gave him political asylum, but while he claimed he was running for his life in Eritrea, a country that supports al-Qaeda terrorists, by the way, he was really in Guatemala smuggling aliens into the United States from Africa. So we know that the political asylum system has no integrity. The House Judiciary Committee just held 2 hearings. One yesterday on abuses of political asylum, and number 2 in December 12th of last year. And what was it about? How members of the Mexican drug cartels are successfully getting political asylum in the United States. They're coming here to avoid the violence of Mexico and their competition, or to carry out crimes in the United States. So now we're being told the solution is to give millions of illegal aliens lawful status, official identity documents, even though there's no way of verifying their identities, and dumping them into a labor pool that can't find work. What could possibly go wrong?
Now, we have an election coming up, one in 2014 and then the presidential in 2016. Where are our politicians on this?
Take your campaign contributions. It's estimated that over $1.5 billion has been poured into the push for comprehensive reform since 2007.
So in doing so, they are, in hindsight, wrecking our country.
Well, not hindsight. I mean, look at it now. It's exactly what's happening. Look at those unemployment rates. We are bringing in more foreign workers every month than the number of new jobs we're creating. We are making American workers run up and down escalator. And Congress is arguing back and forth, should we extend unemployment, shouldn't we, shouldn't we? The news programs vilify hardworking Americans. Oh, they're lazy, they're on disability. They've had their jobs stolen from them. These are people who years ago were working. They didn't wake up and suddenly say, I'm lazy, I don't want to work. Watch the Dan Rather special. And Dan Rather is quote unquote a liberal. I don't know how this is a liberal or a conservative issue. This is an American issue. Barbara Jordan started the Jordan Commission, very liberal Democrat congresswoman, whose position parallels my own. I'm a Democrat, I'm not a conservative. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm a labor guy. I want to see hard-working Americans have opportunities to succeed. Those opportunities are being stolen because this is kind of like when we studied about labor back in high school and college. Remember what the unflattering term for a strike breaker? Remember what that word was? Mm-hmm. Scab. Mm-hmm. We're importing scabs. How nice is that? And we're doing it so they can jack up the profits of corporations, literally and figuratively, at the expense of America and Americans. The trick is this, folks, get a hold of the people that are running against the incumbents. Any senator who voted for S-744, comprehensive reform, they've made clear where they stand, and they don't stand with you, and they don't stand with your children, they don't stand with your community. S-744 would provide unknown millions of illegal aliens with equal standing in a labor pool when you compare them to American citizens and lawful immigrants who followed the rules and played by the law. It would also triple the number of H-1B visas and for the first time allow family members of these high-tech workers to get any job in America they're qualified to do and have as much right to that job as you or I. Go out there and whoever's running, this is the issue for the campaign. Make them accountable. Immigration undermines national security, it undermines the economy, and it is devastating us in terms of unemployment of Americans.
Okay, Michael Cutler, thank you as always. We are out of time.
Thanks for covering this important topic, and it is an important topic.
And to our viewers, for more information on the show, please go to campusteaparties.com, campusteaparties.com.